Maureen, be official.
Okay. Maureen Terrell, present.
And Tracy Wascom, present. So hopefully folks have had a chance to look at the agenda, and we had kind of set what we were going to be handling at our last meeting, but we do need to go ahead and follow the procedural part of this. So if we can get a motion to, assuming everybody is good with the agenda, make a motion to approve that, please.
Motion to approve the agenda.
Leah, just give me a hand to give us a second. So yep, all those in favor, we'll just do the hand raising thing for its speed. Excellent. We are good. Hopefully you also all had a chance to take a look at our minutes from the last meeting. And if anyone has, oh, I will say this, the Marine's a small thing. At the top of the meeting, whose presence, there's a typo in the word and. It says A-N-D, and that's trivial, but we should at least acknowledge the typo.
Okay, I will.
I see there. Beyond that, is there anything that folks would like to acknowledge needs to be corrected? I'm seeing lots of head shakings. Good. So again, we need somebody to make a motion with the one singular typo that we found to approve those minutes, please. Linnea is making the motion with a hand. Need a second. She's a seconding. All those in favor? Robert is duly observed, and we are good. At the moment, this is our chance for public comment. At this point, I do not see anyone who is present with us for that. So we will call that sort of attended to. And I guess very quickly, we will deal with, I guess that's the one correction I should have made, is that I'm no longer vice chair, I'm chair. But we'll worry about that for next time. Really, really quickly. So it kind of happened last minute, but Tina reached out to me, I think it was actually yesterday, about attending or getting a day pass for a conference that it was on public, and it's called Public and Civic Design, which is done by Americans for the Arts. And actually one thing, I'll do this here. Actually, I'll do that. I'll share my screen. So this is the group. So it's Americans for the Arts. So it's an advocacy group for well, the arts in the United States. And the conference that has been going on for the last couple of days is Public Art and Civic Design. And I was able to attend, and actually Emily went to sessions today as well. And I did 4 in total today, and 2 of them were particularly valuable. And these sessions were recorded. I don't know if they'll be available to the public or not. If they are, I will definitely pass on the ones that I went to because they were particularly useful. The first of them was the keynote today, which was by a guy named Paul Farber, who is coordinator in Philadelphia of a thing called Monument Lab. And Monument Lab, their whole goal is to look at public monuments and their role that they have served within, right, our sort of American society, and what our relationship has been to them, and maybe what our relationship should transform into, and how public monuments can serve potentially different needs. Not that they don't honor something, but what is the way that they honor a history, a place, a memory, and how might that look different than how we've typically done that process, right? You don't just literally have to put somebody in bronze on a horse with a big sword sticking up in the air. Like, are there other ways that people's stories and narratives and connections to place might be accentuated? So that was really valuable to sort of think about this idea of monument, the notion that we often have that monument equals permanence. And maybe that idea needs to recognize that monuments aren't permanent. And that's sort of particularly cogent right now as we're sort of evaluating as a society what things we want to honor with monuments, what is our relationship to those locations, and the benefits of allowing those monuments to become new locations where people respond back to those places, and what are also the benefits of considering removing, right, those monuments from our existence. So that was particularly good. He also then sort of touched about some of the notion of the kind of political ramifications of monuments, that as embodiments of power within society, and values that we need to identify, particularly for those of us in the public arts, that as we put these objects in space, they are embodiments not just of a visual thing, but of ideas and ideals. And what are we putting forward in public art through the consideration of what things we say this deserves to sort of be encapsulated, right, in a visual form. And I think that also is something that, particularly as we're charged with thinking about public art in Marquette, that we should kind of take in mind. The second session that I went to was done by a conservator who is based out of Los Angeles. And so her session was on caring for artworks in a pandemic. And so the first bit was this kind of pithy bit that reminds us that bleach is not the way that you take care of public art during a pandemic. Like, bleach plus anything art equals bad. And so beyond that, she then went on to talk about the ins and outs of vandalism. And that was a really, really interesting bit to think about, the sort of public exchange with, as she calls it, an unauthorized act done for deliberate purposes, and the history of that dates back hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. And one of those moments where maybe we allow vandalism, or what we identify as vandalism, to persist and stay. And she gave an example of Subiaco in Italy, which is a site of pilgrimage, and people, as they made their religious pilgrimages to these places, would write their name on this mural. And so those people's names at that site are now this evidence of their devotion. And to remove that would be to erase, right, their response back to this place. But she also, of course, has talked about the kind of current environment where people are very deliberately responding back to kind of public monuments in an unauthorized way, to kind of act out their frustration with a given system. So good stuff, and definitely good fodder to consider as we sort of think about what should public art be, right? And how do we conceive of public art that doesn't just reinforce sort of some systemic and embedded problems, but might actually be used for good. So that's my report. Tina, I just need you to give us you can do it through chat, or you can do it through other means.
No, I'm here.
Okay. Do you have anything that you would like to add as part of your manager's report?
No, the only thing I'll add is we did just renew our membership for American for the Arts, and all of you will receive an email from me, so you can see you're all included on that membership as of yesterday. So all of you will be, you can take webinars for free, order, things for a discount from American for the Arts. And yeah, hopefully it was $100 for a day pass, $200 for this virtual conference, but hopefully you'll be able to then access all of those recorded videos as well. So
yeah, that was, I definitely recommend it. And there's a huge spectrum of content and materials that are there that I think would be valuable as we're sort of undertaking this role on behalf of our community. So the next bit, I guess we are to then is the actual old business part, excuse me, of our agenda. So looking at our 2021 projects, because COVID, of course, sort of has put some things slightly off track. And so the first bit then would be Project Backboard. At our last meeting, we sort of looked at what an initial, let me get to, yeah, and y'all don't need to be reading my copyright final. which I'm happy to say I submitted yesterday, which felt great to get that out of the way. Sort of the prices that we would need to consider as we move forward. So as a reminder, these were the kind of key numbers that we had, that it would be approximately, so just for rounding up purposes, approximately $17,000 to remove and replace the asphalt and the acrylic resurfacing to add the sort of pertinent lifespan to make this more durable would be an additional 10. So we're looking just to provide a foundation for that project, approximately $28,000, and then the additional funds that we would want to allocate towards the actual like implementation and award to the creator to actually execute the sort of creative part of the project. So I guess the first question is, folks, since we have a quorum, are we still moving forward with this? Is this what we want our first RFP as a public artwork to be? So I need folks to kind of weigh in and on where you stand. Okay.
I think it's
unmuted.
a good idea for the first project of 2021. Is there any way we can do something on a smaller scale this year? So we're doing something though. I don't know. I'm for the project. I think it's great, but I still think we should try to do something minor, even on a local little scale this year, because like it was supposed to be Art Week this week and there's not that. And I just would hate for everything to get pushed off a whole nother year.
Okay, so before we talk about that, because I have a thought on that came today from looking at materials prepping for the cultural trail. So let's just initially weigh in on Project Backboard, and then Linnea, I think we absolutely do need to come back and think about, is there something we could be doing this year? So Linnea, you're yes, we need to work on Project Backboard, because then that'll help us then talk about our fiscal year 21 budget. So let's just go, we're just going to kind of go through the list. Maureen, since you're in my upper left, I'm going to ask you, so are you still interested in thinking, are you still thinking this is the first RFP that we should pursue in terms of a large scale project?
Large scale, yes, I agree with moving forward with the Project Backboard.
Okay. Christina?
Yep, same from our perspective. I agree. I'd like to also see what we can target that's a little bit more bite-sized, but definitely in favor of this as, kind of the initial large scale project.
And Hughes, I know this was sort of
yeah, I still like it.
Okay, good. I do too, right? But I wanted to make sure that as we're looking at this, because in doing this, if we're also, obviously, to be perfectly frank, it's not like we realistically probably will not be budgeting, $20,000 to an artist to, create something like once it's done. But our budget, right? It is not, if you pardon the phrasing, it is not the loaves and the fishes, right? We have a limited budget that we're ultimately dealing with. We'll be allocating and already have allocated certain things. And I think it's a good first step. For all the reasons we've talked about before, I like that it integrates art immediately into people's public surroundings. I think that there's so many good reasons to do this, but we're probably talking about, using over a third of our budget, right, in order to make this happen. So I wanted to sort of have us be on the record that yes, we're still game to go. Okay, so with that, in my reading today to sort of prep for the Our Town grant. Let me close this. One of the things I'd done, which I also recommend if y'all didn't go through and look at this, there's a really lovely document that is put out by the NEA, which is Talk About Creative Placemaking. That's free. It's just a PDF that's online. And I can also send that link to everybody that sort of looks at a variety of different projects that different communities have done in order to engage in that process. And in part of my reading, sort of getting ready for that, there was a project here that was done in Philadelphia that was called Respect Your Block. And in thinking about our comments that, I'm going to forget Avery's last name, Tina, do you remember Avery's last name from last week? I don't have my minutes up. I want to
I
think it was,
can look
was it
through my,
Avery Davis or Avery Douglas?
I
I
have
think
to
it's
look through the minutes.
Peterson.
Peterson.
Thank you. I'm
Peterson,
so
yeah.
totally in the wrong end of the vocabulary. But I've, thinking about what is a way that we could potentially do something that was more immediate, that would be not sort of massively depletive of our budget, but could it be like a public something? And I'm not even saying it has to be this, but this had me thinking about the ability to have multiple things that could be created, that multiple voices could find a platform, right, to have a voice. It could be done in a way that is or is not blatantly political, if that's the way that somebody wanted to do it, and could be sort of set up in a way that it was still handled not as a free for all, but setting up sort of anywhere from say 3 to 6 of or more or less of these, and then putting out a request that said, we will allocate and give, I'm just going to make up a number, 6 people $500, right, to create something in these locations, and then get a series of sort of equivalent spots that are sort of with whether it's something like this or not, put in place. Then people could then come in at that location, that is their spot, and we could have something that was more public. I don't know that, again, this is the right solution, but it was kind of something I was like, we could do that. Like, that's something that we could still pull off within sort of our current weather timeline that we face within Marquette. It would be safe in terms of how we would navigate social distancing, because we could put it out in a public place. We would have to see about where that would potentially be. Would that be something that could sort of even exist, I suppose, along our cultural trail? It wouldn't be terribly depletive of our budget to deal with the materials for construction for something like this. But it could also be, Lynn, if you've got other ideas about what else we might do publicly to have a project that would be executable this year, I'm game to see kind of what folks are willing to kick around.
I completely agree with what you're saying. I think that we should do something on the painting scale. Those are just 4 by 8.
Yeah, they're not, and that.
And I like the idea that they're playing off of respect. I think it would, like, respect and kindness, I think, like, are, what would be some good themes for the climate that aren't too, they'd be open to everyone, and things that, you're going to teach from elementary on up, and just being a good citizen. I like the Black Lives Matter murals that have gone on the roads.
Yeah, that was another one that I nearly sent
And-
this link out to, to folks that were looking at the different ways that, and this one had one of the ones on the roads too, I thought, but I might not have grabbed that.
I feel like there's been a couple of them, like, in different spots, and I thought, like, that would be really cool to do. And we have, like, many creative people. Like, if you were to do something on that line where they got a letter and they could decorate that letter however they wanted, and give them if they can cover the supplies, like, I think I'd do it. It'd be fun. I'm sure there's other people that would be willing to do it too. But I know we don't want to just, like, have free artists, but at the same time, it's something that we want done. And if you want to volunteer your time to do it, if you get some money for it, I think that'd be great. And it could be anyone from even high schoolers, and youth could get involved. I don't know.
No, that's so. Again, I'm looking to y'all are in my grid, so y'all are on my left at the moment, in terms of how I'm seeing. So Maureen, Christina, Steve, do you have thoughts on either some other avenues that we might do this? Again, if we're looking at streets, like, if we're looking at, like, affecting a street, obviously we've got other costs that start to happen. And I'm not saying that doesn't mean we don't do it, but it does matter, like, to close down the city street, like, we have to pay to do that, right? The city, like anytime they do a festival, that's what's got to happen, right? There's an amount of time that it's got to be shut. So that's in the cost that we're going to have to incur to do it. We also, thinking with something like that, even with any of these projects, my sense is, and again, Tina, you can weigh in here. We're obviously going to have to get approval, right, to do this. But I suppose it's also something, and I don't know if it would be appropriate or pertinent for us to do it at this point, that could be raised at that July 13th meeting when we do this is what we've done so far. Oh, and by the way, can we also get approval to do this next thing?
Yeah, I think this is an interesting idea with the streets, because it could engage the city commission and they might even get excited about what street. And depending on where the street is, there might not be a fee. I mean, when we do things, since we're a city department, we're not charged for closing our own,
Okay.
parks and things, because that's we're the city, we own that. But a street, might involve the DDA needing to approve that, obviously. I think it depends what street, but that might not be a cost depending. And I
Okay.
like the idea of the city commission having some contribution as far as, where maybe even.
Well, I personally am more of a fan, I guess, of the more traditional style mural. And I think it's just that it's a little easier to digest on a pedestrian scale, although I can certainly appreciate that the street, I mean, it's a cool idea, right? And it's definitely impactful. I think one question I have is just, Tracy, on the photo you have up on your screen now, those look like pretty, I guess, temporary installations. And so I was just curious on kind of your thoughts on, in terms of, location, or if, I know we're just beginning this discussion. But
Literally, yeah, I literally saw these at about 11 o'clock this morning. So it was this sort of, as we're thinking, is this something we could do? I think some of that would come down to where we can. I think, and I guess, again, this is, I'm sorry to keep pestering you, Tina, with you not feeling well, but you might have a better sense of this, since I don't know if Kyle is now done with us, that he's got us technically sort of up to speed. I have no sense of what of the sort of normally more significant outdoor events that typically happen in summer are going on. I know Art on the Rocks, right, is canceled. I can't believe that like the International Food Fest is going to be going on, right, this summer.
No, every event is canceled. The city commission on Monday, I know there's a group, might be it's a faith-based group that's doing a big event in July at Matson. And they're, per the governor's orders, are allowed to gather social distancing with 500 people if they can put forward a plan. I know there's some commissioners that are going to weigh in on that maybe on Monday. Otherwise, that's the only one that I know of. Outback Art Fair hasn't officially canceled yet, but I don't know how they would do social distancing. So there's nothing.
Okay. So, I mean, I think, I'm sorry, I'm like pulling up bits here. So I have kind of maps in my, so I had a thing where I could actually look at that. To me, this is a, to make them visibly available to the public, it would be in a sort of park. I think park environments to me make the most sort of sense, right? Again, so people could see things. We can maintain social distancing, but you're also not making them so remote that people can't readily and availably get to them. If Matson is going to be used potentially for a public event, that would potentially compromise that location, I suppose, but maybe not, because right, there's public things that are there. I think you could potentially sort of route these along something like the bike path, right? I don't think they would be too intrusive to do that. There's other parks within the city that I'm going to blank on the one right now that's there near the co-op, the memorial, is that Veterans Memorial Park, right? That's there, which we may or may not want to use as a space. So I didn't necessarily have a specific site in mind, but I liked the idea that you could have this project. What I appreciated was that you could have multiple discrete voices that could speak, right? That you wouldn't necessarily just have to have one project. You could have multiple projects, that you could allow different individuals to respond back to a prompt. And I think I like the idea in this case, Lene, regardless of the word respect, because I think that as a term is a really valuable and important consideration because it can include those instances where we want to reinforce a kind of commonality that maybe we feel, but I think it also affords the opportunity to allow voices for people who do feel disenfranchised to not sort of feel like they don't have a voice as well. That I think art can bring people together, but it also gives people the chance to have a voice that might not otherwise feel that they are currently being celebrated or visualized through public art in Marquette, right? And so I think there's that opportunity to speak to the spectrum of our community and not just say, yes, this is a sort of fractious time maybe that we find ourselves in, but let's just sort of like tamp it all down and not deal with the fact that there's some problems. And people who want to speak to everybody come together can, but those that want to kind of say, yes, you need to respect me because of this, and I don't feel that respect, might also still have an avenue, right, to communicate that to their, right, to the rest of us.
Yes, I agree. The other thing that I think of too, like I remember being, oh gosh, 15 years ago or so, when I was in college, I was in like the Cat Pack organization. And I remember I had to paint a hockey or one of the speed skating things that they hung up on the pole.
Mhm.
Like, so if we could make that maybe even, different organizations could do one if we had that common theme, and if they were maybe, half the size, they could be, organizations could apply for them and then they could run with it. And that would be, we're basically going to be, we'd pay for materials or supply materials. I don't know. Didn't
No,
they,
exactly.
what about doesn't Blues Fest, did they do the guitars that they hang on all the light poles, or, those things aren't happening because there's no festivals happening. Could we,
No, I think, so Tina, sorry, President Tina again. Do you know the process that's happened when we've had those different kind of
big events?
the big
Yeah.
events that have the things that we sort of, put a thing on a pole with a
Yeah.
sign, and all these different organizations can, get access to them?
Yeah, they've been many times at the Art Center. So the DDA did that. I think it was such hard work getting those signs up there and down. They might have gotten rid of those, all those poles. It was so labor intensive. I'd have to ask them. I'm sure they would be open
I don't think
doing it if.
have to do it on, I'm sorry to interrupt. I don't think we'd have to do it
Oh,
on
okay.
the poles. I was just saying, like, I remember when we did it, they did it that way, and we invited different organizations. Could we create a smaller mural that goes in different parks, not necessarily to hang on the poles, but in a similar sense where to bring community involvement in? And that would kind of be something, since there was no Art Week too, where there was a lot of community involvement with Art Week, it'd be another way for the community to be involved.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's all wonderful. I think it's whatever you guys imagine, we can facilitate that.
Okay. So would it be helpful for everybody here to take a couple of weeks and think about what this might look like so that we address it at our next meeting? Or do you all feel sort of motivated and comfortable enough to sort of commit to a route this evening?
I'd
Steve.
say we need to just wait until the next meeting
Okay.
and think about or pay attention to places around town that might be useful. But otherwise, I like the idea a lot.
Okay.
The only other thought I had was, Timur's Earth Art group. If there was some sort of little thing that they could do out of Presque Isle, that we could support in some way.
Okay. Maureen?
I like the idea of the respect and kindness. I was wondering, instead of using the streets, could we use the bike path if we did any kind of lettering?
Yeah, that's probably it's a great idea. Sure.
Just as, was thinking of it as an alternative. And then I also think maybe for the next meeting, I'm kind of thinking about the same way as Stephen. For the next meeting, if we could just kind of hold off until then and think about where we may want to see things.
Okay, Christina?
Yeah, that makes sense. I guess so that the kind of the points that we'd be looking to flesh out would be the locations, but then I guess also maybe like just the logistics too, right? In terms of kind of how many spots we're looking at, how does, you know, I love your idea, Linnea, about involving organizations too. I think that just broadens the community reach, but just kind of like, who are we going to reach out to? So yeah, I think those are good
Okay,
points to consider. Mhm.
all right. And so Lene, anything else you want to add to the mix?
Sorry, I was talking out of turn earlier. What is there a way to find out more about Timir's Earth Art project? Because I'm not in scope of that. He is my new neighbor, so I do talk to him quite a bit, or just a few houses down. But I'm unaware. Is there?
He has a group on Facebook, NMU Earth Art.
Okay.
They were in the news pretty heavily for putting one together. What was it, a year ago?
Mhm.
All right.
On the Black Rocks, I think they did something.
Yeah, it's like Andy Goldsworthy inspired.
Thank you.
Okay, so folks, that's some stuff to sort of think about. Finding something that we can do at a location. And I'm thinking, actually, I'm currently, I'm Maureen, thanks for bringing up the bike path, because I think that's some, there's like physically using the bike path. I think that's some really nice considerations, because we could demarcate zones even along the bike path. So it wouldn't all have to be just at one end of the bike path. There might be multiple, so we could kind of literally move our way through it. So I think, and that gets people active and looking at things, and all of that is good. So thinking about locations, whether that is street, whether that's bike path or something else, thinking about the number of spots we would do regardless of that, making that available to organizations, and what kind of number or limit are we going to have to set on that? Because if we suddenly have, I'm right. If we had 150 organizations that suddenly showed up at the door and was like, I want to paint a thing, just how many materials are we going to have to come up with in order to allow that, right, to happen? Like logistically, what all are we willing to do? Do we say we're going to allow, again, I'm just pulling a number out of the air, 25 organizations, right, total. And so if you want to do it, apply, right, in order to make that happen. We would have to come up with a set of criteria if we're not just going to let it be a everybody who comes gets to do it situation. So what would we use to evaluate either the idea that they're wanting to explore, if we are going to limit the number of people who do it, just due to the financial and physical logistics of this process. So I think just, again, trying to have everybody come ready to sort of say, well, I've thought about it like this. What do y'all think would be valuable, right? So that we can come and sort of tackle that in a meaningful way. Okie doke. So, and knowing that then that also means we need to be thinking about, regardless of what we do, and maybe this helps dictate it, because this also will jump eventually to our fiscal year 21 thing. How much money are we willing to allocate towards this project? Do we want to, right? How much do we want to put right into it? So we will potentially touch on that at least a little bit, even if we don't know exactly what we plan on doing this evening. So with the cultural trail, just before everybody got here, I touched base with Tina to find out sort of what she was hoping to sort of get from all of us. And hopefully, again, folks had an opportunity to go through and look at the information on the cultural trail, sort of what the purposes of that are. I'm going to kind of come back here to the not text-based version. We'll look at it from the visual perspective. So thinking about Marquette, what the purpose of that cultural trail is, the fact that it does link a number of different community groups as part of the project, with that hope that we would sort of connect people with these landmarks in a safe and enjoyable fashion, making sure that it is accessible, it's educational, but that it also provides an opportunity for art to exist. Again, it keeps coming back that the sense is yes, that this cultural trail will unfold in some shape or form. And the question becomes then, folks, do we want to help or promote having a piece of art along this cultural trail? And if we do, how much money are we willing to allocate? Because that will help sort of speak to the Our Town grant that Tina is looking to apply for, that could then have funds which are sort of matched by what we're willing to put forward. Is that correct, Tina?
Correct.
Okay. So the cultural trail has a variety of different goals and fits into our master plan. There were examples of how this was mirrored in other parts of the country. This also, of course, includes signage and future goals for the community. And this, which is probably the most relevant part, at least for our considerations this evening, is where that cultural trail would sort of reside in the community. So while we're also talking about immediately thinking about a project that we might still implement this year, and knowing that we also have goals to do the project backboard, project next year, the cultural trail project is further down the road, right? Where I think we would find out about it in 2021. And then Tina, I think you said we would have 2 years.
2 years to spend the money.
Okay,
Yeah, so we would find out. In fact, the current recipients were just, I think, awarded last week from this last application. And a little information, I mean, I think they award up to 150, maybe 200. We're able to match as a 50% matching grant. And so a lot of the things that are happening on the Spear Dock can be used as matching funds. So that's, we wanted to maximize, obviously, how much money. We know a lot of the funds would be for interpretive signage to tell a story, which all these groups are weighing in on. And matching funds could make more money for public art. So if you had a project that was 60,000, you put 30,000 towards it, and hopefully, I mean, you wouldn't, if you don't get the money, we don't get the money, you don't have to do it, but it would be a way to leverage more money. That would be really lovely. I should say, might inspire you, might not, but I had 2 long conversations, one with April Lindola of Native Studies and Martin Reinhardt, and they really kind of blew my thinking out of the water, how I was thinking about the trail. And I think they're going to have a much bigger role than I had ever anticipated. They feel like there's a lot of, obviously the Ore Dock is a story to tell. Now we have the charcoal kiln, there's another story, but it's very focused industrially. And Lake Superior Watershed Partnership and Native Studies are recommending that we really get people back to nature and the environment and our shoreline, and go back to our prehistory and our native history to kind of try to help people reframe their thinking. Really use as an opportunity to shift how we think about community and the place we live. And he explained that I was thinking very linearly about this trail. He goes, we're center. I mean, he wants to have they want to have a discussion next year to really think differently about how we might invite people to use this trail. And so I was very inspired. And of course, they're very excited about anything art that might connect with the Anishinaabe culture as well. So I wanted to share that with you because it was such an important discussion. And the trail right now, it is called the Holly Greer Bike Trail. She was the first female mayor. She died last year, and she is a co-founder of Planned Parenthood. I need to talk to her family. She was a lover of history, but you know, women's history is very absent from our community. So I'm excited to bring attention to the fact that Holly, during her tenure with the city, made this bike trail possible. She was the one that advocated that we had a bike trail along the lake. So just some stuff for thought. Okay, I'm going to mute my.
Okay. So, do we like the idea? I suppose the first bit is, do we like the idea of saying, yes, after our Project Backward, right, thing is underway, right, or sort of going, to have another project that actually is in some way located on or in direct relationship to the cultural trail. I suppose that's the first thing. Or how do we feel about that? Are we good? And do I got a nod. Christina's nodding. Like, we're good. Okay, everybody's good, right? That's my thumbs up too. So right, we like this idea. That's great. I also, then it becomes, all right, so I'm gonna make you unmute again, Tina. So this Our Town grant would be available more so if we're sort of locating this project on with the Spear Dock, or regardless of whether we're locating this project on the Spear Dock?
Regardless, I'm really looking at it as the design. We'd be applying for the design section of the Our Town grant.
Okay, nice.
To meet with these groups, figure out how we're going to tell the story, and hopefully it'll include a budget line item for public art, but definitely thinking of the entire trail, branding the whole trail.
Okay. So, and I'm going to start with Christine this time because I haven't started with you. Do you have a weigh in on either a location that you think would be particularly pertinent or important, or is that something that you think would be more valuable to leave to some of the other individuals who have been part of the process establishing the cultural trail to help figure out where that location is?
In terms of kind of a focal public art piece?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
I don't know that I really have, a concrete opinion at this point. I do, overall, I love this idea. I think logistically it's a, quite a challenge just given kind of the size of the project overall. But I do appreciate that, we have kind of those studies and that input already. So I guess I would probably, kind of lean on the group a little bit as well. I do really like the idea of kind of shining some light on some of the more underrepresented aspects of either our history, whether it's the indigenous cultures, or as Tina had mentioned about kind of bringing folks back to nature. I live very close to this area downtown, right across from the bike path. And so I often see, kind of people wandering around and pointing, and there aren't necessarily a lot of kind of interpretive signs. So I think regardless, any of this can help shed some light there. But I think it would be really neat to, to kind of draw the focus. Of course, the ORDOC, is a wonderful site, right? But to kind of bring out some of that other culture. But in terms of a specific location, I don't know that I have one, at this point.
Okay. Steve? Unmuting, please.
I was hitting spacebar.
Okay.
I actually love the connection back to nature a lot, and indigenous population absolutely needs to be involved. In terms of a spot, I mean, I think the Presque Isle Pavilion area would be great. But I guess if I had another question, it would be, how does this relate back to the bench designs from the doc from like a year ago?
Mhm.
Is that part of this?
I have a meeting with George Meister next week, and we're using that towards matching funds. You don't need to spend money on the reliefs on the benches. They're
Sorry,
being
that's good.
they're being made regardless. I think the idea was down the road,
Yeah.
you could do reliefs on the benches. Yeah.
And that was the hope, that we would set up a framework where we could have smaller incremental projects on the benches that then would be counterpointed by larger, right, public art projects. So that's great that we would have that infrastructure in place. Okay, Lene? Well, and you need to unmute too, sweetie. There you go.
I thought I did. All right. So if the bench thing is going to happen, we would in a way be able to have art in two places. with
Or
this.
more.
So then if we have one already represented downtown, then you can most definitely go more to nature in more of the lower populated, like, or developed areas. Like Steve said, Presque Isle, I think that's great, or somewhere in between. I agree.
Okay, Maureen?
I like the idea of the pavilion at Presque Isle. I was also wondering about over by the Welcome Center, because there's all that kind of, they've gone back to having like the wildflowers and stuff along the bike path there. So I thought maybe that might be an opportunity.
Is that, do you know, does anyone know if that's township? But is that, I don't think that's city, the Welcome Center?
Yeah, I'm almost
Kyle-
guaranteed that's probably township. Yeah,
Yeah, it would have to happen on city property.
Okay.
but it doesn't mean, I think, Maureen, I think you've made a good point that that might be something like long-term, like maybe not this bit, but maybe there's a way to actually partner with the township to like link, right? It seems almost ridiculous to say these two parts of Marquette when we're not that big. But as a way to sort of bridge that gap, right, as you continue, right, the
Mhm.
bike path down that way. All right, so I'm just making a note for myself here. All right, so I guess, well, actually, I will do this first. Tina, do you have a thought? And then I'll weigh in on kind of where I kind of stand on this thing.
I
About a
really like what
location.
Linnea said about areas that are less developed. And I think it would be interesting if this larger committee of stakeholders starts meeting regularly. It might inspire the Public Art Commission as they kind of an unfolding, as we're really starting to look. So that would be a part of the process, is to identify an area. But my initial reaction is, yeah, somewhere where it's there's a lot of space to take something in. Things are pretty built up around Founders Landing area.
Okay. I'm going to actually, I completely agree. I think that sense of, for any number of reasons, getting us back to nature, and also just in terms of accentuating the length of this cultural trail, it's beneficial to sort of ensure that we don't literally just saturate, right, all of these objects down at one end of it. But I also want to reiterate Christina's sentiment that I think we also need to be talking, right, to the members of this community who have sort of looked at the cultural trail and see if maybe they've got sort of compelling reasons to think about particular sites where that sculpture might be, whether that, like, in talking to representatives from the Center for Native American Studies, whether that's, Marty Reinhardt, whether that's April Lindell, that would say, right now, I mean, a lot of the things that we have named on our cultural trail talk back to a very particular facet of the heritage of this community, right? They're tied back to mining, they're tied back to fishing, they're tied back to the people who settled in this location, as opposed to people who right, literally lived in this location for long before people of Finnish or Irish or Welsh or any other descent that came from Europe, right, showed up. So if they have along this particular part of the shoreline, some particularly kind of potent or significant location, or one that they feel sort of drawn to, I think it would be wise and appropriate when putting an object onto land that was the Anishinaabe people's land in the first place, to actually at least have some sort of conversation with some even obviously they can't stand these individuals as absolute representatives of that community, but they can at least provide a voice, right, as an advocate for that community that I think would be worth listening to in this process. And maybe it is Presque Isle Pavilion, right? That might be perfect. But I think it would at least be good to have that conversation so that we engage our community in making those choices before we just sort of say, all right, this is the spot we think would be the best. So hopefully, Christina, that was at least in the spirit of also kind of what you were saying. So I suppose then, Tina, to your question, yes, it sounds like we're interested, right, in doing this thing that yes, will reside somewhere along this trail. And so then I suppose the next part of that is obviously we don't know what this project is going to be because we don't even have a site yet, let alone, right, having approved a project. But knowing that we will find a site and with the hopes that we would get equivalent matching funds from the Our Town grant, recognizing that we have, okay, so just kind of doing some quick math. We have $94,000, right, in our budget. Approximately, I'm rounding here, approximately, right, 4 of that, Tina, right, is going to go to the Artsopolis.
3,500.
I'm just rounding, right?
Yes, okay, yeah.
That's going there.
Okay.
We know that, does that 94 include what we paid for the images that were shot of the collection? Or has that been taken out of our budget already?
I will have to look at that. It might not be reflected in the numbers I was looking at. Yeah,
Okay.
good point. And that was that almost 4,000?
That you would have a much better indication of that. I don't have that information. right in
Okay.
front of me.
So I'll get
We'll have Forrester, right, that we also will be paying for branding. And we're probably talking realistically, and again, we don't have the number, and I'm going to actually look to Hughes here for this. What approximately, I mean, just, okay, if you just spitball it for me. If you had to envision, or like, you know, we're gonna have to figure out what are we going to pay somebody to paint 4,400 square feet, right? Plus we're going to have to absorb supplies for that too. I know I kind of had a number in my head, but I don't know if that number is like realistic.
I have no idea, honestly. I can
Yeah.
reach out to the people there and ask.
That would be great, right? Because that's kind of significant, you know, for us to know.
For all I know, they may be relying on volunteer.
Sure. And we may have people where we could do that too, but you still ultimately, the person who's guiding that process, we don't expect them to just do that out of the glorious largesse of that. That's just not good, right? If
I
we're going to
get it.
value
Yeah.
artists, that's just not cool. So I'm going to call it, I think this is probably me. So I'm just going to assuming we haven't taken the money out for the photos yet, right?
Mhm.
So if I just start doing that, so if we got 4 and 4, I don't remember what our RFP was for Forrester, or if he just, if we even gave him a budget.
I think it's 3,000.
Okay, so that's fine. I'm just doing rounding up math right now. So if we haven't taken anything out, I'm going to pull this part here now up. So for Artsopolis, for our photos, for Forrester. All right, and I'm just gonna, so everybody just has this number here, so we don't have to do this here.
Do we need to clean the statue too, Father Marquette?
We should, yeah, we should budget for having that cleaned.
Again?
Well, did it happen though? We have to,
Well, I thought
No,
I thought we had protected it, and then to prepare it to have its photo taken, somebody decided to power wash it, which of course took all the protective wax off of the bronze.
Right. Needs to be re-waxed.
So that's going to have to get, and that's of course why we're eventually going to get to the document that reminds everybody that power washing, like bleach, is not always the best process that we need to undertake if we want to conserve our artwork in the community. So we're going to hold Father Marquette for the moment because the bronze will at least last a season or two without doing the waxing. It's not ideal, but it's not instantly going to fall down and destroy itself. So before we've done anything, and I'm just going to do this in Word here. So, right, if you've got $94,000, we have approximately 11. Let's just do it this way. We have 11 between Artsopolis, between paying for the photo documentation, and Forrester doing the branding. It's possible we have a little bit more than that. It depends if the money for the photo documentation has come out. That's the case, that's where we are, right? On top of that, if we, just to get our surfaces prepped for, all right, so let's do, sorry, I'm doing math on the side here too. What is that? We would be there, right? That's to get the materials removed, to get the old asphalt out, to get new asphalt in, and then to get the acrylic protective coating put in place. I also asked Tina 2 questions at the beginning of the meeting, which was, one was the company that she reached out to, the only individuals in the community who actually could undertake that project. So is there the possibility of getting a competing bid? But second, would there be a possibility of lowering costs by getting community members or volunteers to donate their time to help with the demolition? So whether that would be something that the Friends of the Market Public Art Commission could facilitate, one with the group who was even willing to undertake the putting of the asphalt down, allow us, right, to do that, and would that be a way to do it? So that $56,000 would still need to include the money that we would like to see for materials and an artist to do the project backboard, right? We've got to account for that. We do need to account some amount of money for our project that we're talking about doing this year, right? Whether that's on the bike path, whether it's on the street, whether it's in some other fashion. And then we also need to think about how much are we wanting to sort of put forward to a project that would exist on the bike path. So, right, those are the things that we, some of our budget, obviously we're sort of looking at, but we need to sort of figure out how y'all want to sort of allocate that money, in particular for the Our Town grant. So of that $56,000, so let's do, and I know, Steve, we might not be able to fully allocate Project Backboard because we don't know what that's going to cost, but we can get at least something, and then hopefully we'll kind of overshoot it and know that ideally that, right, we can back it off and clarify between this meeting hopefully and the next one. So that and the,
yeah.
Go ahead.
Stephen just asked me how much was Ryan's sculpture. It was the whole project. I'd have to go back to look. The benches were included in that, Stephen. But it was almost 30,000. He was paid, Ryan Bryack.
No.
What's that, Linnea?
Well, there'll be 30,000 more for next year too, correct?
Oh, no, Ryan's money, that was given by the Iron Ore Heritage Trail, paid for that.
Right.
And then we had grant money, but yeah, I was just letting him know how expensive. There is a chance, and Tracy and I have talked about this, given all the serious cuts that are serious revenue loss that the city has faced this year, I mean, it is not out of this question that there's definitely a chance that you might not get the money this year. You know, this budget showing them at your presentation might make them realize, oh, 90,000 doesn't go very far. We better get that money to them because they're doing really impactful work and this could make a difference. So I think hopefully that money will be there next year. That decision will be made in this budget cycle.
So that's
Maybe if you budget for it as if it is there, you know?
and I think that's, I mean, at some point you sort of do, right? That this is
Yep.
what we'd like to be able to do. So
I just lost everyone. I can't see you. I just think if we're spending so much money on the project backboard just to get the surface prepared, we need to put in a good amount of money to make that really phenomenal. I lost everyone. Am I still in the meeting?
yeah, you're still here.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep, you're a video and a voice, sweetie. You're there. I suppose the other part of that project backboard question, and I'm also speculating, I could guess the answer to this, but I think guessing does not help us. Tina, you had mentioned that you were going to check and see when the last time that court actually had been sort of attended to, right, in a significant way by the city. Whether there would be, and to me, would there be another revenue stream? Like, would the city be willing to cover the $16,500 to get the new asphalt done? And we'll totally take on the $10,000 to do the appropriate acrylic top coating in order to allow this project to continue and pay the artist and the materials, right, to make it happen, right? So treat it like a partnership.
Yeah, it's not, there's so many jobs. I know that one's not even on the radar. You could propose it, but I know there's serious cuts in all of the capital projects. Another thing to consider though, is we do have the Friends of group who will be raring to raise money from the community to support whatever project you request from them.
So I still think we should assume, right, I think that would be a good thing to for lack of a better word, sick them on, right? To sort of like, this would be good. It's something that we can do, but that and be able to say, look, we're allocating this money, but if we want to also make sure that we have future funds available, the more of this project that they can cover, the more that our reserve, right, to allow us to take on future projects, right, exists. So I think that is a good consideration. Okay.
Yeah, I think we could go into it thinking, okay, we'd like say the Public Art Commission wanted $100,000 sculpture, just say. You know, I don't think that means that you have to put all the money forward. So we look at other grants, right? We look at Michigan Arts and Cultural Affairs grant, local foundations, Friends of. We look at if it's as a native focus, there's the 2%, is it 2% from the KBIC? So, you know, we could go in with the intent, this is what we'd like, but there's other funds that have to be raised. And if the city commission likes the idea, then they would say, okay, Tina, spend your time writing more grants to make this project a reality. You know, I don't think it has to be all from your fund.
Okay. All right. So I realize we're in kind of a weird thing, but I know that part of this is we have to at least temporarily put a pin, right, in what our budget, and some of this, I suppose, as we get a little more information, like Steve, if you can find out between now and 2 weeks from now what Project Backboard sort of does, we can adjust these numbers. But let's just stick some tentative numbers down now, right, and then we'll adjust accordingly. So
Can I just ask a small question
oh,
ahead of
Christina,
that?
please
So
do.
when does our fiscal year for 2021 start? Like, is the summer 2020 project, is that already budgeted and we're looking now at upcoming, or are they all in the same fiscal year?
Right, so October 1st is the new fiscal year.
Mhm.
There is money in the budget that we budgeted for general promotion. There's some money. Public Art Commission's a different animal. If we need to amend the budget at a city commission meeting to for this year yet, if you wanted to spend money, that would be fine. They totally expect that this group would come in the middle of the year. You're not like you're any other city department. It's very unique what you do. And I know that you could amend the budget. So if we get something that we, at least for them to approve now, you could go back and change it.
So are there funds currently that are left over that can be allocated to the summer 2020 project, or are we looking, you know what I'm saying? Or is this all part of the 94?
Right now we're looking at it as the big, is the big 94. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so throwing a dart at numbers here. Why don't we start?
Is there a way that we can request that or put in there that we'd maybe like 10 grand towards resurfacing? So then we could use that 10 grand for more art? Like, would the city buy into that maybe a little bit? Or hope?
Yeah, can always get them really jazzed up, and then maybe Department of Public Works will say, hey, yeah.
So in this
Here's
case,
the
if that was
project.
The $30,000, like, or 28 or whatever it was, going towards just preparing the surface before even any art. That's like a whole year's worth of public art to prepare the surface. That seems like ridiculous. But I think it's a good project. I'm not saying I don't want to do it, but I just buy in a different way.
Okay, so on the hopes that they will, but acknowledging that they might not. How much tentatively at this moment, understanding that we will hopefully get this clarified better for the next time, would we like to set aside for the actual painting and payment of the maker for the design on the basketball court?
Steve, do you have any idea?
He just did the say, he's like, realize that we have no real sense of what this is going to do. Some of it might be based on volunteers. In part, what we're trying to do is get to a number that we can identify for the cultural trail, right? And so it's kind of, and maybe it would be helpful for us to say it this way. And why don't we think about that? How much, knowing that we're talking about making a matching, if we wanted to stick a number that we think would be a good number for a sculptural form, and as Steve asked, like Ryan's piece was 30, right? Was $30,000 in order to do something. Do we want to try and do another? I mean, and that's actually kind of about what we're looking at, right, for our project backboard, right? At a minimum, it's going to probably be about that. I'm guessing it'll actually be more than that. But on the cultural trail, do we want to say we want to put something that is larger than that? Do we want to say we'd like to see a sculpture that we're going to allocate a budget of $50,000, which means 25 of it's going to come from us? Or do we want to sort of say we're looking to do something on the scale of Ryan's work, so about $30,000, right, in terms of its scope, which means that we would be allocating about 15 to the project. Also recognizing that there could be other funding opportunities. We just need to sort of say, how big a thing do we want to do?
And his piece was steel, right? I mean, what if you guys decide you want to have something of bronze or concrete, or that's casted? I mean,
that's not going to really be known until we actually know what RFPs, right? I mean, how much are we going to dictate the materials that we want to come forward versus what the maker would dictate? But we need to know what the budget, like, folks, I realize that this is a tough thing to do, but we got to pick a number.
I think up to 20, 15 to 20.
Total?
No, to match. So then that would give you up to 30 to 40 match. That'd be a decent, I don't know, that's just a guesstimate.
Would you like to, I guess, okay. In terms of its visual impact, do you want something that is of the scale and scope that Ryan did, or would you like to see something grander?
I mean, that totally depends, right?
It does, but I mean,
Depends
we've
on the
got to,
location.
it does. And I realize, but if we're trying to deal with a deadline, because Tina, I'm thinking that our town grant comes soon, correct?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
We can split this up, right? Like if it does get funded and matched, and we don't have a grandiose project, but maybe we have two,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
it can be used to do that. It doesn't have to go to one single one.
Right, right. You could say we have this much, we're gonna put two pieces. I don't think it needs to be decided yet. And maybe you shoot higher and we also plan to get funding from these other sources, you know? And so much of it will come from your actual budget.
I just want to make sure that we don't take away from the project backboard. If we have to fund all of the resurfacing, I hope we would be able to have enough money to put a good chunk towards that. And then whatever the remainder could go towards, I don't know. I just don't want to cut that other project.
Well, it's also a reminder that, and even for the project backboard, is that this is also the point that as we're figuring this out, that's when we start to put the people who will fundraise for us, right? The Friends of the Market Public Art Group, that's when we put them to work, right? That's what we're there to do, is that if we've got a good project and we're saying, look, we've got this much, but man, we could make our money go so much further if you all could cover this. That's when they right, they get out and do their advocacy for us. So I think we have to be responsible attendants to this, but I also think that we need to trust that there are other avenues available to us, and there are other people who are willing to sort of come to our assistance to get the job done.
Cultural Trail is, we're only looking to fund the one or two or whatever, maybe art pieces at this point, right? We don't like the signage or anything like that. Does that
That's
come?
correct.
Okay,
Tina, my understanding is that we don't have to worry about funding signage, right? That is
No.
not our deal. So
No.
does that change kind of what you think should be kind of happening, Christina?
No, I mean, honestly, this is not my area of expertise.
No,
so.
and I realize that's not it. So it's that what we're trying to figure out kind of what all we like. I think I want to see us do something at least the scale of Ryan's work, if not slightly larger. If I'm gonna say that if this is our opportunity, especially if it speaks back to recognizing and identifying our Indigenous community, I think that's the least that we can do. But that's my sort of take.
Well, what's your number then?
My number, I think, for the project, I think if we were going to do it and also potentially take into account things that might include things like whether landscaping and all of that becomes part of its surroundings. Do you have a relationship back between the sculpture and sort of Indigenous plants of the area? Anyway, I think if we talked about for that kind of project, tying it to the Our Town grant so that it actually has kind of a kind of prominence to it, for a project total, not that that's what we would put forward. My sense was about $50,000. And then recognize that our half of it would be 25. And again, if we get our $30,000, that's a different thing. If we have the fundraising, that's a different thing. So that the total would be sort of 50K total. And then the MPAC part of that would equal 25, right? Towards this component. And then that's my number. That's my number, right? Because I think it would be really nice to, wherever we are, given the fact that we've got so much, wow, and I'm sorry, I'm about to get like literally the sun blasting through my maple tree in the front. So much of our visual sculptural forms seem to be so heavily weighted down in Lower Harbor that to do something that anchors the cultural trail with a sculptural form, whether that is all the way down at Presque or whether it's somewhere else along there in a way that is substantive in some way. It doesn't necessarily mean it's got to be done out of bronze, but that it is palpably visible, right, in some form, I think warrants sort of being attentive to either its scale, whether that's one physically large thing, if it's multiple interconnected pieces, and recognizing that depending on where we put it, we're also going to have to deal with just the flat logistics of, do we have to pour a concrete base for a thing, right? And that's going to sort of increase our costs, right, beyond just the materials to build the sculpture itself, or if there's lighting. So I think having a top end where we can absorb some of the unexpected costs would be valuable. I'm going to just quick go shut this blind, lest I literally am blinded for the rest of our meeting.
I feel like giving that that description, I would add more into that, honestly, from us to account for things like the surface being prepared, because I don't know what the surface is like out there wherever it goes. All the reclamation stuff that they're doing right now. If we put something near something like that, is something additional needed to anchor it? I don't know. I mean, I'd toss another 10K on the total project at least. Me,
Oops.
30 then, right? So, because
right?
This and then here.
I was
And I-
20.
All right. So that gives us, right, we can adjust. So at that point, and while I realize that we have to be attentive to this, I also think it's important that we recognize if we always, all right, this is not how I handle my personal finances, but I recognize that this is also the way that can happen, that if within the political framework, if you don't use money, they assume you don't need the money. Right, that is, again, that is not the way. Hopefully we, like, sometimes we have to live paycheck to paycheck, but we hope that we don't live paycheck to paycheck. And I guess I'd rather see us use things for stuff that's visible and then kind of go, you want us to keep doing, if you want us to keep doing what you've asked us to do, you need to replenish our coffers. That we need to, again, be good attendance, but also not make it where they can say, oh, well, clearly you just had that money sitting there. Your budget doesn't need to be as big, right, in the future.
So is there a way, does that mean that you want to use the money for next year like it's there? That's what you just said, correct?
Well, no, actually, I want to say, so at this point, if we pull this off, that means we have $22,000. Like, I mean, the cultural trail wouldn't need that assumes we even get it, right? That assumes we even get that grant, right, to allocate it. No, I'm saying that we need to sort of say, then we'll do it this way. How much do folks think that they'd like to spend on our summer project? Let's assume it's the bike path. Just assume it's the bike path, whether it is or not. Do you want to say we're willing to spend $5,000, $6,000 to
Yeah,
make that
I'm
happen?
good with that, because I feel like that one is, I feel like there's a lot of probably enthusiasm in the community, and it's, if our goal is to kind of more engage the community, and it's a good kickoff project, but not necessarily like, one of like the flagship piece of art that we're talking about for the cultural trail. I think that's reasonable in my opinion. And the nice thing is we can kind of tailor the scope of the project to the budget too, right?
Yeah. Steve?
It sounds good.
Maureen? Which do y'all like? Do you want to like split the difference, 55, or do you want to go 5, 6? Where do we want to go?
I would just do 6 and then put the remaining 20 at project backboard.
Okay. All right. So this. All right.
I know that, like before, Tina was saying, would always kind of stress, like they want to see something now, and then that way we're giving the community something now, so they don't forget about us too.
I guess it's not impossible. I guess my hope is that it wouldn't be another $20,000 on top of the money that we're already talking about to do the project backboard, like for $20,000 to pay for somebody to come and paint and do and all those materials. I don't, again, you will have a better sense of that after Steve finds out, right, what he finds out. So are y'all okay putting 20 there, or do you want to put a different number there? You're saying, so Leah's got 20, Steve, Christina, Maureen. I know what number I'm thinking, but again, I don't know if my number is reasonable or not.
I don't know, 10?
That's kind of where my head was, but I don't know.
Well, how
Christina?
about 15?
Yeah, I guess I'm concerned for that one, that it sounds like it's probably going to be a lot of upkeep. And so maybe that's not something for this coming year but in the future, but I would hate to see, kind of all that effort go in and then it's, my experience, a lot of times that kind of falls to, or tends to, there's a lot of enthusiasm to get the initial project up and running, right? But then it kind of falls on volunteers and such, which is fine if it does. But so yeah, that 15 or 10 is fine. I guess maybe it's just a consideration for future years then.
Yeah, and that's going to be part of, again, our budget as we're looking down the road, as we actually have more works that we are actively engaged in their conservation, right? That we know that part of our budget is going to be making sure that if things do need to be touched up or cleaned and re-waxed as they turn out to be, that we take that into account. So Tina, does this, we can formalize it more. Does this help you?
Yeah, and maybe we could just have a short conversation tomorrow, kind of, this much for professional contractual for an artist, break it up a little bit.
Project Backboard, we're not going to know the answer to that until after Steve hears back from what that's
Right.
going to be.
Okay, but we know site preparation,
Well, that bit we do know, right? Because you've got those numbers.
Right.
You've got that part. We're talking about this 10 to 15 is going to be the cost for the paint materials and paint materials design and implementation of the actual project.
Yes.
Linnea?
The other, I had made a comment a while ago, but I don't know where, I lost everything. I can't see anything. But is there a part of the bike path, since that was a possibility for this summer's project that we know that has been recently repaved, that would, if we're going to do projects on it potentially, that we should use a good piece of pavement versus one that's not? Would we be able to find that out before our next meeting too? And then the kind of paint, should we be using the same type of paint that we will use on Project Backboard if we're painting on a surface such as the bike path? So it lasts.
I suppose the question is, is the assumption that this is going to be temporary or ephemeral on the bike path?
I was thinking it was a temporary art piece. Right when it starts getting a little too wear and tear, it would be painted over.
Okay.
That's fine. I still wouldn't know what materials to use, so that's.
Yeah, we'll still have to find out.
So is somebody, and so we need to find that out, Tina, do you mean that's something we need to talk to the city about, or that somebody needs to do some research on?
Well, I think Steven said he was going to contact Project Blackboard about what kind of paint.
But that's really specific to that project, right? That's
right.
Specific.
But but it is asphalt, and
I already got those names. I don't have them on the top of my head right now, but
okay.
I can send that out again.
But those things are actually intended to be more durable though, correct? See, that's my sense. And so if this is about being ephemeral, that might not be the paint that we want to use. If this is about recognizing that it's for now, we're going to do this thing. And then once all the snow and the snow plows and everything that start going over the bike path do it, we're not going to sort of worry about preserving or trying to restore that for next summer.
Yeah, I would like that expertise to come from the artists among you. That's exactly that, I'd be calling you guys to ask your opinion about what kind of paint.
But I don't know that any of us have ever painted. I've never painted on asphalt. I have no clue what that should be. So I think that then, since Steve, you're on the kind of project backboard side of things. Is someone willing to take on doing some research and taking advantage of the Google to find out, I'm in the sort of search string, want to paint temporarily on asphalt. What should I use? And then report back to us in 2 weeks. Anybody willing to tackle that? Thank you. That's great. Thank you, Linnea, for being willing to do that, so that we can see what that will actually entail. I mean, obviously there's ways to do it where we know it would be like uber temporary, where we could do sidewalk chalk, but that's just going to smear every single time somebody walks over it and bikes over it and do that. And I think that's more ephemeral than we're talking about in this instance. So,
And then we're all still brainstorming on other ideas potentially too, like
so the
different applications, maybe
Yep.
they could have a choice of, wood mural versus.
right. So, but again, this is the, like, folks, think about what you think would be a good potential ephemeral project for us to tackle this summer, where we can point to something, right, that we're going to implement this summer, whether that means it's I mean, I think where they're talking about like mid-August, like, do we target it for when Northern, I mean, right, so sorry, my universe is Northern, so like when students en masse return, I think just logistically, do we look at something that's like early August, right? Because, can we make something sort of come together after we meet in 4 weeks, or do we want that little bit of an extra window to actually implement it? So even if we decide at the beginning of July, how quickly, based off of what you would like to see done, right? Whatever you're willing to come forward and advocate, do you think we need in terms of a timeline to get it done, right? To sort of put the system in place, right? To make it happen, come forward with a series of questions that we can ask Tina to sort of reach out to the city. Like, is there something where you're like, Tina, well, we need to ask the city to do the following, right? In order to make this happen. So actually start to think about the logistics of, if you've got an idea for something and you're going to implement it, what do you think it might need? And we can obviously flesh that out further, but to come with a plan so that when we get to the meeting, we can sort of say, yep, that's a great plan. Christina, okay, have you thought about this, 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 and this? And if that's the one we settle on, then we can sort of move forward and look at an actual timeline, right? In order to try to make this thing, whatever the thing is, happen.
I have a question too. The Harvest, the Barragate Avenue Harvest Fest, they would do a sidewalk chalk thing, and Cleveland Clips often sponsored several of the squares and different things. So who was in charge of that? Does anyone know?
It was the
That's
DDA,
a
wasn't it?
children's, Harvest Fest will be no longer, but the Children's Museum is the one that organized the chalk and raised the money. It was a fundraiser for the Children's Museum.
Because that always had a good turnout sort of thing too, and I don't know.
And
Yeah.
Nina is on the Friends of.
Mhm.
Okay, good, thank you.
Okay, so we've got all of us some tasks to think about in terms of what that might be. And it does also mean, and this is one, since Hughes, you brought it up, if you think that as part of that $6,000, some of that is sort of reaching out to Tamara and seeing if, that the earth art, right, is that another component of it, that's certainly within the sort of realm of possibility. We've always acknowledged that we could solicit specifically, right, individuals in order to make a particular project happen if we think that would be sort of meaningful and good. So yep, we'll come back in 2 weeks. We'll definitely be looking at these ideas. This is also, I suppose, a possibility, Tina, regardless of how we do it, for while not the necessarily a mural in a sort of long-term implementation, but that might also address Avery's request for us to think about a way for the community to respond back to the sort of kind of cultural zeitgeist that's occurring right now too. So with that, does anybody have any good of the order before we kind of scoot out of here? We're just a couple of minutes over our line. I think we've got a lot of head shaking for no good of the order. Enjoy our weather while it's not cootie and gross. I'm not a big fan of the humidity. I lived in it and I don't need to live in a sauna all the time. Just not interested in that process.
Tina, did we ever agree on a time? Is it next Thursday or Tuesday at 4 for meeting with Jeff and Artropolis?
Yeah.
Okay.
Would work if we could go a little bit later too, if he needed to.
I haven't looked at emails. Did not work today, so sorry.
No.
But there is an email. I think he might have responded. I know I felt bad because he was kind of in our. There's everyone.
Yep.
Yeah, so I don't know when that meeting is. I'll have to look at my emails.
It would also, I agree, if we can find out or in the meantime, and so again, I feel bad asking Tina to do this while she's clearly under the weather. From the city, what part of the bike path has been recently refinished or paved, which might make it a better surface for us to do. Would it be useful for me to sort of provide you an email list of questions that would be, okay, I can do that so that you can deal with them on a day when you're feeling less under the weather?
Yeah, and we're furloughed one day a week too. So if I don't know, I'll see how I feel tomorrow if I'm going in. If I start getting a cough and a fever, then I won't go in. I'll go get a
Then don't.
COVID test. But I don't think that's anything. So it would be next week if that's not too late, Monday, if that's not too late for you, Tracy.
I don't think, I mean, really what our timeline, what we're really looking to is, and if that can just get sent to everybody so that we know as part of this process, that can let folks who are thinking about that as a possible venue, right, to sort of absorb that into thinking about like if the location is somewhere that is sort of nested and more remote, and that suddenly says like, well, it's not quite as public as we'd like it to be. Does that change, right, their proposal or their kind of sense of how they'd like to see this project unfold? So, okay, thanks folks, we appreciate the time. Tina, I'll send you an email that sort of has this initial breakdown of what we know, and then we'll come back in 2 weeks and we will I'll tackle what our summer project may look like and try to pin that down in a meaningful fashion, and hopefully also have an opportunity to tackle ideally the last part of our kind of maintenance guidelines so that we can also kind of get that sort of logistical component out of the way. And we may have some additional information then hopefully also about Project Backboard to sort of pin down that part of the budget to refine it as we look towards the city commission.
Yeah.
Particularly as I look towards the city commission presentation. Okay, folks, y'all have a good night. Thanks so much for everything. Kyle, I guess you getting us
Thanks
out of here.
everybody for all that work. That was a lot. Thank you. Thank you,
We'll see y'all
Kyle.
later.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, you're welcome.
What's that?
I said you're welcome.
Oh, you're welcome. And another
Hey, little
smiley
boy.